Testing, there it is. Are we ready to roll? Oh, we like you being in the picture. We appreciate the Valley Church of Christ hosting and providing childcare and cookies and drinks and refreshments, and it is awesome to have good hosts, and we appreciate it. How many of you, out of curiosity, and I know everybody's not in here, how many of y'all are visitors like us and live elsewhere, or there we go, got a few of them. Let's us in here that are visitors take a second and thank them for hosting, all right? We're gonna look at another session, and we'll close with a little bit of homework assignment that will be pretty easy tonight, and then a video that we'll close out with in a second. Let's talk about traits of a healthy family, and yeah, we'll look at that in a second. I don't know if you remember, if y'all were here, it's been 2 years ago, and you forgot by then anyway, but I told a story a couple of years ago on a Sunday morning when I was here about a guy that I met that was a millionaire. And he'd been on Millionaire Matchmaker on TV, where they tried to set him up with someone. He'd never been married, mid-50s, his name was Dave. He spent all of his time from the time he turned about 18 making money. And I was fascinated with his story. When he started telling me about his life, I mean, he's got a jet. He's got houses in California and Miami. I was in Miami when I met him. And I was just like, man, this guy's got it made. You know, talk about the life. Buy anything you want to buy. But as we visited for a little while, he told me, he said, you know, the one thing I don't have, he said, I've never slowed down long enough to have relationship, to have family, to have a wife. And he said, I find myself, he said, I'm 55 years old, and I would have thought he was 45, good-looking guy. He said, I'm 55 years old, and he said, the one thing I've got, I can't buy. I mean, the one thing I don't have, I can't buy. And he said, I've been on TV, on these shows where they try to set up with a millionaire. I have tried all this stuff, just haven't had any luck. And so I spent 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes trying to encourage him, tell him, you know, hey, maybe we need to focus somewhere other than just on finances a little bit, you know, and try to give him some advice and try to give him some of this sort of stuff. And it was just kind of a brief encounter that we got to visiting. He didn't know me very well. I didn't know him very well. And after about 45 minutes, my wife and kids kind of decided, hey, it's time for Dad to go. We're in kind of, you know, my kids were hungry. Dad, we're over here. Just wanted you to know if you hadn't seen us. That was their way of going, feed us, you know. They were all still in, you know, teenagers. And Dave, who I'd been visiting with, and we hadn't even talked about me at all, he goes, who are all those people over there? 4 boys, my wife? I said, oh, that's my wife and 4 sons. And he said, all of those are yours? And I was a little embarrassed. I really was, because he wasn't trying to say, you know, do y'all ever get out of the house? You have 4 kids. And so I told him, I said, yeah, I tried to give him a quick rundown of our life. I said, we were high school sweethearts. We married right out of high school. We started having kids. We got 4 boys. We've been married 22 years now. We're still in love as we always have been. And we've been saving money for months trying to come out here for vacation to Miami. And Dave, for the first time, really kind of looked at me in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. I'll go to my grave remembering this next sentence. He said, when he realized what I just told him, he said, you are richer than I will ever be. And it took me about 2 or 3 seconds to process what he said because I was a little confused. And then the bulb came on. That life isn't about what you accumulate. It's not about how much money you have in the bank. It's not about whoever dies with the most toys wins. Life is about relationships. Relationship with God, relationship with your spouse, relationship with your kids. And I was rich. And a millionaire just told me that I was richer than he would ever be. And I was blown away by that. I remember catching Lee and telling her, hey, you're not going to believe this. We're richer than a millionaire. And she looked at me like, you've been in the sun. You need to sit down. I've seen our bank statement. We are not. But I will never forget that occasion. But the longer I have lived, the more I come to the realization that there is nothing more valuable in our life than our relationships. Our relationships with our parents, our relationships with our children, our relationships with our spouse. And you can have a whole lot and be very poor if you're poor in relationships. Or you can not have a whole lot in this world and have a lot of relationships and be very rich. Because we tend to value things wrong sometimes. Notice what God says. This is Psalm 127. This is David who writes this. And he says, unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. We just talked about that. God's got to build the house. And he says, children are a blessing from the Lord. Not an interruption, a blessing. Children are a blessing from the Lord. Offspring, notice what he calls them, a reward. If you have children, if you have relationship, God has rewarded you. And your children are arrows. Like arrows in the hands of warriors are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man, blessed is the mom and dad whose quiver is full of children. Blessed is the person whose quiver is full of relationships. And we're going to talk more about that as we go. But I've come to the belief that you and I, that's the most important thing. And when someday, I do a lot of funerals, someday when they bring that casket in that this time's going to have me in it, and they wheel it up to the front and somebody stands up and speaks, that if somebody gets up and simply says about my life, and it's true, he loved God and he adored his wife and he loved his children, that's the only three things that mattered. In fact, you could just say that and say, let's go eat some potluck. Let's go have some barbecue. Because none of the other stuff matters. It's all gravy. What really matters, did you love God? Did you love your spouse? Did you love your kids? Were you rich in relationship? Because those are the things that matter. So let's spend a few minutes and let's talk about healthy families and some traits, some characteristics of healthy families that Lee and I are going to work through for a second, all right? Healthy families display irrational love. Healthy families display irrational love. Notice it doesn't just say healthy families love each other. It doesn't say that. Irrational love, because that's kind of how God's love is. God's love is irrational. Our love in our world today is conditional. I'll love you if you behave right, if you do right, if you jump through the right hoops. God's love is irrational. God says, I love you no matter what. God says, I love you enough that I'd let my son die for you. That's totally irrational. It makes no sense to me. I would give my life for a lot of people, but I'm not giving my son's lives for anybody. But God loved enough that he did that. Sent the best that he had. God's love is irrational. And notice this word, display. It's an action word. Meaning your kids and your spouse, they need to hear you say it, but they need you to show it. A whole lot more than they need you to say it. It's one thing for me to tell Lee all day long I love her, but she really, really likes it when I go, hey, you fix supper tonight. Let me get in there and clean up I'll clean up tonight and I'll do the dishes. And she's like, you're so good to me. It's because it's action. action going, I love you and I'll serve you, displaying irrational love. And we do it in a lot of ways. God gives us that feeling. When babies are born in this world, God gives us that irrational love that says, I don't know this child. It just came into the world. It's my child, but I've never met this child, but he's here, and I'll die for him if I have to die for him or her because I love that child, even though I've never met this child. The first 2 years of their life, you know what they do? They interrupt your sleep. They poop on you. They spit up on you, and yet you love them somehow or another. It's irrational love. We love. Now, sometimes they become teenagers, and it's like, it's a little bit harder to love them, right? What's the old story about had Isaac been a teenager when God told Abraham to go sacrifice him? You know, Abraham might have been going, all right, I got this. I can do this, you know. Teenagers sometimes can be difficult, but God expects you to display irrational love. Your teen kids and even your adult children are still going to make mistakes, and you are still to love them. Display irrational love. You continue to love them. Now, there's some different ways to spell love. Time, T-I-M-E, spells love. Your kids need time. You need to make time for your kids. Rules spells love, R-U-L-E-S. If you love your kids, you'll give them rules. Rules are healthy for children. Give them rules. 87% of college students, when polled, said, my parents didn't give me enough rules. I thought that was kind of interesting. Touch, T-O-U-C-H, spells love. Your kids need touched. Let them know you love them. My kids, my grown sons come walking in the door. I might have seen them last week. Every one of them's going to come hug their dad. I'm perfectly fine with that. Every time I see, my dad is 82 years old. I don't know how much longer I got my dad. He has become very weak and a little feeble. His mind's still sharp. But every time I see my dad, and when I come in and before I leave, my last time to go, the last time I saw him, he did this. He got up out of his chair, which was not easy for him to do. And he hugged me. And he hugged me longer every time than I always think that he's going to. Long hug, pats me on the back, and generally tells me he's proud of me. I'm going to miss those someday. It's important. Kids need touch. It doesn't matter how old they are. Your parents need touch. Discipline. That spells love. But display irrational love to your kids.
Listen, L-I-S-T-E-N.
That's a good one.
That one spells love. Your kids know when you're listening and when you're not. Your spouse knows. Put the phone down. Shut the laptop. Pause the TV. We spend too much time in front of screens these days, and that it's a thief of our time and our attention to our children. So give your kids show your kids that you love them by listening and really listening to them.
One of the verses we'll look at in the morning says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. The word love there is an action word. God's love is an action love. And he tells us to love our family with action. For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only son. God's love is an action love. How do I love my family? I'm going to love them with action. I'm going to give them time, and I'm going to give them rules, and I'm going to give them whatever it is. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to love them with action. Communicate with love and grace. Communicate with love and grace. Healthy families do this. That means healthy families, can I tell you real quick the opposite of communicating with love and grace? Yelling, screaming, losing control, losing your temper, cussing at someone, calling names because you're frustrated with them. That is the opposite of communicating with love and grace. We personally don't feel like there's ever a place in your family for yelling, screaming, cussing, calling names, or losing control. Nobody's ever lost control of their temper in their family and thought, I am glad I did that. That turned out better. You know, you always regret something you did or something you said. Communicate with love and with grace. And we've got to be cautious about saying praise versus criticism. When we talk, be careful about your tone. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. That's always a tough one. Tone. Where'd that come from? Look at another one. Have no black sheep or favorites in your family. Or, can we put it this way? Value the uniqueness of every individual. Value the uniqueness of every individual. We're all very different. Families, God has got such a sense of humor. Would you agree with that? That he loves putting people together in marriage that are just almost like polar opposites sometimes. And then he'll send kids that are in families and they're polar opposites. I mean, I've got kids that are, they look alike, but they act totally different. They like different stuff. Lee and I are that way. We're going to talk about it in the morning. We're very, very different people. But because somebody is different from you does not always mean that's a bad thing or that it's your job to fix them.
We, when it comes to our kids, we have 2 introverts, we have 2 extroverts. We have 2 that were strong-willed. We have 2 that were just pretty easy and go with the flow. We had 2 that needed discipline a different way from the other 2. We had a couple that school came really easy for, and then a couple that we had to stay on top of them. We had to work a little harder at school. But we never compared one to the other, and we never said, why can't you be more like your brother? Because that's, having those favorites or black sheep, and you got to be so careful in your families not to do that. Everyone is important. Everyone serves a purpose in your family, and you love and value the uniqueness of each individual.
Including that strong-willed child that God has placed in your family. You love them, and you be patient with them, and you help point them in the right direction, and you kind of help chisel down those rough spots in there. But to tell one child over another, you should be more like your sibling, when they weren't created anything like their sibling. It's just hard to hear a child say. And so we've got to do a really good job at understanding our children are very, very different. I remember specifically, I love it when all my kids come home and the house is loud, and we've got a couple of, you didn't even mention that, we have a couple of very loud children like their father, and I mean, they are loud. And then we've got a couple that are a little bit quieter. But I love it when all my kids come home, and usually when Christmas, I build up Christmas way more than I should. I'm kind of the, who was the Christmas guy from Christmas Vacation? Anyway, Clark Griswold. Yeah, I build it up way more than I should, but when they finally all come home and the entire family is there, when they go home, I'm a little blue. Because I'm the extrovert. I'm the one that, I loved my family being around. When Cooper was home, he's our youngest, he's kind of built like his mama, and he's quieter. He's your introvert, and everybody went home, and it was over. I mean, I'd been waiting for weeks for everybody to get here, and I'm blue. I'm just, the house is quiet, and I finally go back and I go in Cooper's room and lay down on his bed, because I just want to be in a room where somebody's at, I just need some company. I need some companionship. I'm just trying to feel better about myself. And about 5 minutes into me being in his room, he looks up and he goes, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Son, I'm sad everybody's left. Everybody's gone home." And he goes, "Dad, we've had a house full of people all week. I finally get some alone time in my room, and you showed up." And I'm like, like his mama. He finally was, I'm going to go to my room and finally have some peace and quiet, and Dad comes and lays on my bed. But they're all different, and it's okay. Let them be different. They're not, if it's a character flaw, you work on that. We understand that. But your children have personalities that are all going to be very, very different. If your kids aren't like you, that's okay. We've got kids that, man, some parents have come in, they've sat down in my office before, and, you know, they said, my kids, they don't want to do 4-H. I've done 4-H all my life. And I'm like, they're good kids. Who cares if they don't want to take care of a cow or a sheep or a rabbit or something? But I love 4-H. That's okay, but your kid doesn't. It's okay sometimes that your kids are different. I had a dad sit in my office one time. My kid dresses different than I. I said, your kid's a good kid. Why does it matter what he looks like and what he dresses like? If he wants to wear his jeans a little baggier, that's okay. You know, we decided when our kids were in high school, we were going to pick and choose our battles. And one of the things we decided to not fight over was our kids' haircuts. You need a haircut? Let me know, we'll get you a haircut. But when you're 17, I'm not going to tell you how to wear your hair. Our kids had pretty long hair, nothing crazy, but they had some pretty long hair. Hair that I couldn't have when I was growing up. But it was just kind of like, they're good kids. I'm not worried about how long their hair is. As long as they're washing it and keeping it clean, that's where we're going to fight, all right? But I don't care if their hair's longer than what I wore mine growing up. If they're a good kid. We just have to learn that it's okay that if sometimes our families are a little bit different, accept one another's differences. Let's go on. Let's look at the fourth one, all right? Don't abuse or shame. Can I also in here be cautious about guilt? If you're motivating your children by abuse or shame or guilt, that's really not the way to motivate your kids. There's a big difference between disciplining your children and abusing your children. It's not a fine line. It's a clear, we're going to talk about this tomorrow. But be cautious about using shame or guilt to discipline your children. Talk to them about what is right and what is wrong. Will there be some times where they feel guilty? Absolutely. Is it okay? Sure it is. But if that's your main game plan, that's really just not a good game plan. You need to provide a place in your home for your kids a safe place for your kids to fail, because they're going to fail. Your kids are going to make mistakes, and they need to know, I'm going to make a mistake sometime or another, and you want to be the kind of father and mother that your kids can come to you when they do. So provide a home that says, this is a safe place. You're going to mess up, and I may be disappointed. I may be a little aggravated, but I'm still going to love you. We need to provide homes that do just that. Our spouses are going to make mistakes, and we just need to do a good job at being parents who realize your kids weren't trying to embarrass you, even though they may have embarrassed you. Give them a safe place to forgive, find forgiveness.
There was a wise father that when his son turned 16, this father remembered what it was like to be 16 and some of the mistakes that he made as a 16-year-old. And he wrote his son a letter. He wrote a letter to himself and gave it to his son. And he said, son, I would like for you just to tuck this away. You can read it, but it's a letter written to me, and I want you just to tuck it away in a safe place for if you ever need it. And when you read the letter, you'll understand why. And so the son read the letter, and he stuck it in a drawer, and it was forgotten for several months. But sure enough, the night came where the son was driving, had been drinking, had an accident with dad's car that, did a lot of damage to the car, was out way past curfew. Anyway, the story just kept getting worse and worse. And he came in, and of course, Dad was waiting for him to come in. And the son immediately went upstairs to his room, got the letter out of the drawer, brought it downstairs, and handed it to Dad. What the letter said was, Dear John, remember what it was like to be 16. Remember the mistakes that you made as a 16-year-old. Obviously, your son has made one of those mistakes. Go easy on him. And so the father was reminded of a time in his life when he needed that understanding and that listening ear and that hug that said it's going to be okay We're going to work this out. So he told his son, he said, you go upstairs, you go to bed, we'll talk about this in the morning. Just know there's going to be some discipline. We're going to talk about some things. But you remember that I love you and that you're important to me. And that's all that matters right now. So be that safe place for your kids to land. Have that wisdom that that father had to remember some of the mistakes that you made as a teenager.
And that doesn't mean that we're by any chance saying, hey, sweep things under a rug at all in any form or fashion. It just simply means to just remember, sometimes if you're going to err, maybe err on the side of grace, but be cautious about when it comes to your children of drawing those lines in the sand that go, hey, it's my way or the highway, because that's a pretty harsh thing to do. Look at number 5. Place a high priority on God. Place a high priority on God. Now, we talked about this a while ago. Let's talk about it a little bit more, because I think it's that important. We're going to talk Sunday about this more. This is going to be one of our texts that we look at. So we're going to spend a whole lot of time on it now. But in Matthew, we hear about Jesus when he was 12 years old. Do you remember? He goes up to the temple and he hangs out there, and his parents go home and forget him for like 3 days. We're going to go back to that story, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. But one of the neat things about that story is that Joseph, by custom, by law, Joseph was really the only one required that he had to be there. But the Bible teaches us that every year Joseph and his family went and did this together. That it was a spiritual trip that they took together over and over and over. And it was not one of those things that you just kind of go, do y'all want to go this year? If you don't, that's okay, but if you do, that's great. Every year they went and celebrated this together. It was a regular thing. Think about it. Joseph and Mary didn't make God a small part of their family growing up. They made it a large part because they were raising God's son. I know y'all understand that. In healthy families, spiritual priorities, they dominate. Let me put it this way. Sometimes in our world today, we tend to go, we're going to let everything else become the most important thing, and then we'll kind of take the spiritual things, and if there's room for them, we'll work them in. And God goes, that's really not the way I planned it. God goes, let's make me the center of attention, the spiritual things, and then you work the world things in around it. And we become people that do just the opposite. Let me give you some examples. Where I live, summer ball is a really big deal. You go, what's summer ball? That's where kids disappear and you don't see them for a whole summer. Where families all of a sudden go, we'll be back to church this fall, because right now we have summer ball. Now, I'm not against baseball. My kids played baseball. My youngest was really good at baseball. But when all of a sudden we start moving God out of the picture to make other things more important, there's some issues in there somewhere, because spiritual priorities ought to be the things that dominate. So let me take this a little further. If I hadn't kind of aggravated you yet, I will. So hold on just a second, all right? We teach our kids by the time they're 2. If we're from Arkansas, to say woo pig suey. If we're from Oklahoma, they can sing Boomer Sooner. If they're from Lubbock, Texas, they can talk about Reckham Tech and the Tomahawk Chop if you're an Atlanta Braves fan, and they can sing Fly, Eagles, Fly if they're a Philadelphia Eagle fan. But they have no idea what the Lord's Prayer says. They can name the offensive lineman or who the quarterback is on their dad's favorite football team, but they can't tell you who 3 of Jesus' disciples were. Somewhere we become people who said, we'll just sprinkle in a little bit of God stuff in our life, when God goes, no, I really want you to make me the main dish. And I know that's hard, because it's hard for us as well. In Childress, Texas, high school football dominates. You go, how big does it dominate? It may be the same here. We have parents that hold their kids back a year so they'll be the oldest in their class, so they'll be the better athletes. We have parents that take off work early on Friday because they would never be late to one of their kids' high school football games. They'll drive 120 miles one way just to get there, burn the gas, eat supper, be there long before the kickoff. They'll yell and cheer, and if it goes into overtime, that's even more exciting. And then they stand around when it's over and talk about it. But if you go into overtime on Sunday morning during church, that ain't a good thing, folks. We'll go sit in a 100-degree temp on a Friday night and watch a kid play baseball or football. But if it gets 73 in an auditorium on a Sunday, it's kind of rough around here, isn't it? You see what I'm saying, right? We have no problem sitting on a bleacher seat for 2 hours to watch one of our kids play, and we can't get up and make it to Bible class on time on Sundays. Something's not right there. We've got to do a better job of letting priorities, spiritual priorities, dominate. We didn't do it all right. Can I just say that? We're still trying to figure it out. But there were a couple events when our kids were in school. There was a Tulsa workshop that took place in March. Some of y'all been to that, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it happened during school time. And we drug our kids out of school every year for the Tulsa workshop. And our kids loved it. Now, part of the reason they loved it because they got out of school. But they also loved going. And their school would ask us, do you know you're getting your kids out of school for a religious event? We do. Did you know that we may not be able to make this an excused absence for your kids? We do. Do you not care about this? We don't. We were not going to let school get in the way of educating our children. Now, we loved public school. We loved our teachers. We loved our principals. They were good to us. But there were things more important. And sometimes it was religious activities. And we pulled our kids out and we would go to a religious workshop for a weekend where our kids would go and love it. We still go every year in June to the Red River Family Encampment in Red River, New Mexico. Part of the reason we go is because it's Red River, New Mexico, where the temps are 70 degrees when it's 100 degrees in Texas, I'll admit. But there is singing and there is teaching and there are Bible classes, and every one of our kids every year goes, are we going to go? And we're going, hey, we'll rent a cabin if you'll go. And they all show up every year. That's important. And if they want to go, we'll keep renting a cabin and finding a place to stay. Because spiritual priority, because, we've taken off work to go to football games and baseball games. We have. So why are we not taking off and spending some money to go on some mission trips and some other things? All I'm trying to say and get across to you is we need to do a good job at letting spiritual priorities dominate in our families. So let me give you a quick statistic and then we'll move to the next point. For your high school athlete who's playing summer ball or whatever it is, volleyball, whatever they're doing, for your high school student to get a full scholarship to a college, it is a 0.02% chance. 0.02. That's way less than 1%. For your college kid that somehow or another gets that scholarship to play college ball on a full ride, if they ever got that, there's like even a less, like a 0.0038% chance that they'll go on and play professional sports somewhere. So, the chances are like none. Can I just remind you real quickly, but the chances someday that they will stand before God are 100%. And it's your job to get them there in the right shape, to point them in the right direction. Spiritual priorities are a big deal. And our families need more of it. And dads, that's where you step in. Not trying to be mean, dads. When you became a dad, God pushed that job description across the table, Ephesians 6 verse 4, that says, train your children. And he wasn't talking about train them to gut a fish, to clean a whatever it is, to hit a baseball. He's talking spiritually. You train your kids. And we're really, really good at training our kids athletically, academically. Hey, we're going to fish in. We're going to train you some life skills. You be just or more set, dead set on giving those kids spiritual training, because that's the thing they need in this world. Now, let's go on to number 6.
Healthy families teach service to others. Do this together as a family. Start when your kids are young and serve other people. Take food to somebody who's sick. Mow a widow lady's yard. Drag your kids down there and have them help you. Buy Christmas for a family who can't afford to buy their kids Christmas gifts. But serve other people and teach this to your children when they're young. Take your kids on a mission trip. Let them see how people live in a third world country. Talk about changing their worldview and how important it is to serve others. Healthy families also serve one another within the family. That's what families are about, is serving one another. Sometimes we do things when we don't want to do it. Sometimes I'm irritated because Trey leaves his clothes in the floor, but I pick them up because I'm serving God some days. Maybe I'm not so much serving him, but I'm serving God. That's what God expects me to do. God treats me better than I deserve. Sometimes I'm going to treat my family members better than they deserve on days maybe when I just don't feel like they deserve my service. But that's what we do as families. And we show appreciation to our families for what they do. Don't take your family for granted. Trey always does the yard work. He always keeps our cars washed and filled up with gas and tires rotated and oil changed. He does all of that. And I'm so thankful because I don't want to do it. And I tell him, thank you for doing the yards. Thank you for keeping up the cars. And I do the laundry in the house, mainly because I fired him from it after he ruined a load of clothes years ago. But it's okay. I don't mind doing the laundry. I kind of like doing laundry. And he tells me every time he comes through the room and I'm folding laundry, thank you for doing my laundry. We show appreciation to each other. Do the same for your kids. Give your kids chores around the house. Teach them that responsibility. Teach them that we do for each other, but show them appreciation for what they do. If they've taken out the trash, appreciate that. That's what healthy families do, is they serve each other and they appreciate each other for that service.
Yeah, and when you catch your kids modeling good behavior or doing something, as we talked about, spiritual priorities, man, really give them a lot of praise for those things. Tell them, hey, great job. When you see them treating someone well, when you see them being respectful to someone, go out of your way to tell your kids, I am so proud of you. You did so well. We're just so good at telling our kids how well they do when it's athletically or academically. And it's the life skills, the integrity, and things along those lines that are so important that we show and tell our kids. Wow, I hit the wrong button. That's all right, I got this. Here we go. You hit one button and you go crazy. Pray. All right, pray with and for your kids. We're going to talk about this tomorrow a little bit more. But can I just talk about prayer and how important that is? There shouldn't be a time that you don't sit down at a meal that you don't pray for it. I don't know if you've ever noticed. There's not a spot in the Bible where Jesus had a meal that doesn't say he stopped and gave God thanks for it, blessed it. I think it's good. Our family still does that. And it doesn't matter if we're at home around the table or if we're at a restaurant and it's really loud and you can't hear the guy praying at the end of the table, but somebody stops and tells us God thanks. That's just kind of our family. We don't do it for anybody else to see. We only do it for the sake that that's just what we do. We're going to take a second, we're going to give God thanks, and we're going to say a prayer. We think praying together is an important thing to do, to just stop and give God thanks. and we're hoping that that has played out some on our kids. We're going to talk more about that in the morning, a whole lot more about that in the morning. But we wanted to bring it up because this is the thread that's going to go through every session, that we're going to talk a little bit about how important it is that you pray together as a family, playing together. So we pray together. We're also going to play together. I told y'all earlier, working in what I do, I've been a part of a lot of funerals. And sitting down with a family to say, I am sorry that your loved one's passed away. Let's talk about the memorial service. We want to tell some stories about them. What are some specific things that you remember? I'm always amazed at about 80 to 90% of the things that families talk about are times when they played together. I remember when Dad built the basketball goal in the backyard, or the vacation, or when we used to go to the top of the hill outside of town and Dad would drive us up there and we would ride our bikes down and he'd drive us all back up. But it's always family activities where they played together, which really instilled in me how important it was that families need to still be playing together and having fun together and doing some fun things together. That is just so important, that we become people who play together. Teenagers, it's a little more difficult. You're going to have teens, and you're going to, all of a sudden, your interests and their interests are going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to find your way into things they like a little bit more. I've learned to talk my kids into, hey, I used to play Mario back in the 90s. We should try that. You want to try it? Yeah, Dad. Is that a fun game? They whipped me. You know, it's like, I don't know what it is about 16-year-olds, and they just know how to play video games. But we spent an afternoon playing and having so much fun. You just learn over time. Find your way into things that your kids like to do. Sports. Going to, Lee and I talk all the time. One of the things that we have together and with our kids, we're all big baseball fans. We love baseball. And so we can always talk baseball with our kids, even at times when there's not anything else to talk about, or maybe when they were teenagers and it was like, well, I don't have a lot in common with my 16-year-old son right now. We always had baseball because we could always connect in an area. So learn to play together. That's important.
You know, a great place to play together is around the dinner table. Our family, when we all get together for holidays, or if they just come home for a weekend, they love to get around the table and play some kind of card game or some kind of board game. But playing together is so very important. And I could spend a whole lot more time talking about the dinner table, but I'm not going to, because Trey is going to do Sunday class. The death of the dinner table is what that's called. And so he's going to talk a whole lot more about that. But it's kind of a passion of mine, and I'd love to keep talking about it, but I'm not going to steal his thunder right here.
Yeah, the dinner table is important.
The dinner table is important. It provides that place to play, to pray, to talk, to build memories.
It is. And you can set this up for me. So what have we done today compared to what have we done in the past around the dinner table? What's the difference?
Oh, well, so today, if this is what you're talking about, a lot of times we go to the living room and take our food, and, we sit with our food in our lap, and we're in front of a screen. And used to, that just wasn't the case. Families sat around the dinner table. There was no TV in the kitchen. Phones don't come to the table when we sit around the table to have a meal. We talk and we laugh. And we're building memories as a family. And we've got to get back to the dinner table.
Yeah, so we will talk about that Sunday. I hope you'll be around and we can visit more about that. Let's talk about modeling values and integrity. Healthy families do this. Healthy families model values and integrity.
They do. Children learn their core values, their core beliefs by the time they're about age 5. Now, they keep growing and they keep learning all throughout their lives, but by the time they're about 5, they've kind of learned those core things. And so you've got to start early teaching them values and integrity. You got to start teaching them manners, when they're little bitty, and you do that. You start teaching them how to say please and thank you and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. Also, respect for authority. That goes along with that yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am. We got to be teaching them that respect for authority. they hear how you're talking about the police officer on the corner, about our government officials, about their teachers and their coaches. They hear that. And so they're learning how to have that respect, how to have it or how not to have it. They're learning that from you. So teach them respect for authority. Teach them what the Bible says in regards to those moral values. Get them to Bible class. Read the Bible together at home. You got to be teaching them that integrity. Kids need to know that they're expected to do the right thing even when nobody else is watching. And we do that by modeling that for them. I'll never forget a time when my oldest was 3 and Taylor was 3, Parker was 1, and those were the only 2 we had at the time. And usually when I needed to go to the grocery store, I would wait until Trey was able to come home so that I didn't have to load them all up in car seats. Y'all, you mamas know that. It's a chore to take kiddos. And so if you can avoid it, load them up into the car seats and into the baskets at the store and all of those things. So I would wait until Trey could come home. Well, there was one particular time when I had to get to the store, couldn't wait for him. So went to the store, did all that stuff, got home, I'm getting them out of the car, unloading all the groceries, and I'm in the kitchen, putting things away, and I noticed Taylor gets a package of gum out of his pocket and starts opening it. And I said, "Oh, where did you get that gum?" He said, "I got it at the grocery store, Mama." Well, you walk past all that gum and candy right there when you're checking out, and he just grabbed it, put it in his pocket. I never saw it, and so we got home without paying for the gum, and I had to explain to him, although he was only 3, and I thought, I don't even know if he'll understand this, but I said, we have to pay for everything that we get at the store, and we did not pay for that gum. You did not ask Mom if you could have that gum. And so I loaded both of them back up into the car seats, drove across town to the store, got them out of the car seats, took them in, made him pay for the gum. And it was a chore, and it took a whole lot more time out of my day than I wanted it to. But hopefully, it taught that little 3-year-old that we do what's right even when nobody else knows. Nobody else would have known that he had stuck that package of gum in his pocket and that we didn't pay for it. But it was the right thing to do, to take it back.
Yeah, values and integrity. One of the things that require values and integrity is sometimes, again, we'll talk about this tomorrow, but sometimes letting your children reap what they sow. Some of the best lessons in life that your children will learn is when they make mistakes and you let them have to pay for the mistakes they made. It's easy sometimes for parents to either want to say, hey, well, my kid really wouldn't do that. Your kid really would, and so would mine. Or we come along and we go, well, I probably can pull some strings and help them, where it's not so. And that's not always a good thing either. One of our children, our second oldest son, Parker, who is a good kid, never broke the rules, sends a message one night. In our little community, we have a midnight curfew on the weekends for anybody that's under 18. We're great because it made me, when my kids would go, what time do we need to be in? Well, curfew's midnight. You better be home by midnight, and I want to know where you are. So he messages us about 11:15 and says, Dad, we're finishing up a movie over at Shelby's house. Bunch of church kids. They said, this movie's not going to be over till about 12:30. Can I stay out till 12:30? Well, I knew where he was. I knew who he was with. I knew the house where he was in. The parents were there. I mean, all the rules were fine. The only thing I said was, curfew, you could get a ticket for staying out after midnight, right? And he responded, text message, Dad, no one ever gets a ticket past curfew. I gave him permission to stay out after midnight. Guess who got a ticket that night on the way home for being out past curfew? He did. And he was not happy about it. And as a dad, I wanted to just take up for him because he's a good kid and he really didn't do anything wrong, except he did break one of the rules. So my first thought was, I said, go to bed, we'll talk about this tomorrow. And I laid in bed and I thought, well, I don't even have to call him. This is a small community. Judge Jay Maiden is one of my friends. I will text him and I will tell him Monday morning, Parker was at a so-and-so's house. It was a church group. They're fine. I knew where he was. He had my permission. I had no doubt Jay Maiden would have said, take that ticket, throw it in the trash. I will take care of it. I had no doubt. But his mama, in her wisdom, said, but will he learn anything from this if you get him out of trouble for this. And I thought, yeah, you're probably right. He probably won't. So we came up with a plan and said, Parker, here's what we're going to do. We gave you permission to stay out past midnight, but you asked, and you did it. So we'll pay half of whatever the fine is. It was $120. I didn't really want to pay $60, but that didn't hurt me near as bad as it did a 17-year-old kid that mowed lawns in 100-degree heat in the summertime to make money. That was a lot of money. Guess how many times he missed curfew after that? 0. Guess how many times he asked to miss curfew after that? 0. Sometimes when we let our kids, when we model what is right, and sometimes that is letting them get in trouble for what they've done, sometimes that's the best thing that you can do. We'll talk about that more tomorrow because we have a different story with a different kid who did something different that we chose to, sorry, buddy, you did the crime, you can do the time. Healthy families seek help when they need it. They seek help when they need it. There are times in families where you're going to come along and you're going, I just don't know what to do. And can we just suggest seek help outside help? Counselor, a minister, a mentor. Look around, find somebody that's raised kids and go, hey, can I ask you how you handled this situation? But seek help. Don't sweep it under a rug. There's a book, a podcast. There is every topic, every marriage topic and family topic in the world, there is something on whatever subject is that you're dealing with. There's somebody that's got some answers. Don't just ignore it and think it's just going to go away. There were times, lots of times, where we had to reach out and go, all right, so how do we do this and how do we do that? And find you a couple somewhere that you can reach out to and ask questions. But whatever you do, don't sweep it under the rug and go, it'll just get better if we ignore it. Things don't get better when you ignore them. Generally, they just get worse. Let me show you this last little picture right there. Your kids are arrows. We read it in the first Psalm 127. If your quiver's full of them, that's a good thing. If you've still got kids at home, if you got grandkids, you may be sitting here going, my kids are gone like ours. I have grandkids. And actually, I still have kids. Your job as a parent is to point those kids for the first 18 years of their life. And they're going to fly wherever you point them. And there's going to come a day, some of you may be there, when they're going to start their last day of high school as a senior. And you're going to realize, whoa, my time is coming quick. They're about to leave and go to college. And then they're going to have their last prom or their last this and their last that. And then you're going to blink and they're going to walk across the stage and they're going to get their diploma. And all that time you've been aiming, and you're going to have to let them fly. And it's really, really important that if you have your kids home right now, that you are aiming them in the right direction. Because you'll blink twice and they'll be gone. It was just the other day I was dragging my kids out of bed for school because I'm the morning guy. And now there's no kids to drag out of bed for school. If you're rich in relationship, you are a wealthy person. When my boys were small, on Fridays, trying to get them out of bed was a little tough for school because we'd already done it 4 days in a row. So I bribed them. Every Friday it was, if y'all will get up in the morning without me having to twist your arm, just get up, we'll go to the bakery and we'll get donuts. And every Friday, they loved getting up because it was donuts with Dad. And we'd go load up and we'd go to the bakery. And I'd come piling in with all them boys in the bakery. And the first 3, 4, 5 times that I did this, there was a gentleman, an older gentleman, drinking coffee at a round table in the bakery, sitting in there with some older gentlemen. And every time I come in, he would go, there comes the richest man in Childress, Texas right there. And my first 2 or 3 times he did that, I thought, he obviously thinks I am Dr. Caldwell because he's tall like me and because I'm not the richest man in Children's. I don't know who he thinks I am, but I am not the richest man. He did that every week, and then it finally hit me one day. He was talking about, here comes Dad with 4 little boys to have a donut. And he is rich in relationship. That's exactly what he was saying. And he still, up till about a year ago, when he finally passed, that little man, he would go, you're a rich man with those 4 boys. They grow up fast. There are times where I wish I could kind of blink my eyes a couple of times and go back and have one more Friday where I drug all them boys out of bed and we'd go have a donut. If you still got your kids at home, point them in the right direction. We're raising kids. And we got to build them homes well. So here's what we got. We've got, it's time right here, but I want to show you a video here in just a second. We'll pull it up in just a second. Before we close, do you have, Robert, one more thing you want to mention? You want to close it out tonight, or you want to close us with a prayer in a second? Okay, let's watch this video. We're going to start back at 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you get a chance, if you're going back and you've got a little time tonight, spend a few minutes going over the session we just did. The 10 traits for a healthy family, and ask your spouse, how are we doing on these 10? Is there 2 or 3 that we need to work on? And maybe you can identify 3 in there. Let's circle 3. You go, man, we really need to do a better job on these 3 right here. That you can start making a priority that maybe, hey, we're not doing a very good job playing together or praying for our kids, whatever it is. And identify those 3 things. And I'm going to ask you in the morning if you took time to identify 3 little areas in there that you can do better as a family, all right? So we're going to watch a video. This is really good. How many of y'all remember the song from the 70s, The Cat's in the Cradle? Oh, that is my least favorite song ever. People are always like, oh, that's such a classic. Have you heard the words? It is about a dad that abandoned his kids growing up and he didn't have time for them. And finally, when he slows down in life and says, son, I have time for you, the son says, I ain't got any time for you, Dad. What a terrible song. It just breaks my heart. And you know, a investment firm a few years ago redid that song. And it made it a Super Bowl commercial. And when I saw it, I thought, we got to show this. Because what they did was they changed some of the words, and instead of making it a dad that didn't have any time for his kids, they changed the song to make it, hey, here's a dad who's got time for his children. And he makes time for his kids, and it makes a difference in not just his kids' lives, but his grandkids' lives. And I have yet to be able to watch this video and listen to this song that I still don't get the big lump in my throat. Dads, you matter in your families, and this is important. Let's watch this video, and then Robert will close us out with a prayer, and we'll start back in the morning at 9.
My child arrived just the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. So I moved my meat and saw him walk that day. He was talking for I knew it, and as he grew, he say, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be like you. My son turned 10 just the other day. He said, thanks for the ball, Dad, come on, let's play. Can you teach me to throw? I said, right away. I got stuff to do, but that can wait today. And he ran outside and smiled ear to ear and said, I'm gonna be like you, Dad. You know I'm gonna be like you. Well, he came home from college just the other day. He said, I can't thank you enough for paying my way. What I really like, Dad, is to borrow the car keys, take you to dinner and discuss my dreams. Soon we'll retire, our son's well on his way. He came by with a question just the other day. Need your advice, Dad, with what to do when I become a father just like you. Become a father just like you. kiss in the cradle and the silver spoon. Little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I'll be home in 10, and we'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time there.
Makes me want to thank TD Ameritrade. It's quite a commercial. Thank you for showing it to us. And thank you all for being here. To simplify, when Jesus was asked what's the greatest commandment, he didn't give one, he gave two. The first one was love God. Love God. That's first. He didn't leave out the second one. The second one was love your neighbor. And he chose in his story to make it the most kind of distant neighbor, the abused victim of crime on the side of the highway, right? But everybody closer than that guy is also your neighbor, especially the ones in your home. So when Jesus gave the two most important things we're supposed to do, it's love God and love people. And that's what we've been talking about tonight. And of course, people in your own family. We love customers, and they're kind of customers, and sometimes we get home and we're abusive and harsh and impatient with our own family. We love other people connected to our business and what we do and what we're out there, but we don't have time for our own family. Anyway, before I close with a prayer, tomorrow morning we have our first session at 9, but at 8:30 there'll be enough of a light breakfast next door that you can come early and have a bite to eat. Coffee and other light breakfast items so you can have something to eat. You don't have to rush yourself at home. You can come over here, relax, have a small bit of breakfast food, and then we'll start our first session at 9, second session at 10, third session at 11 approximately, and we wrap up at noon, which gives you plenty of time to go to the fair, which started today. So you can get to the fair tomorrow afternoon. Thank you, Trey, Lee, appreciate it. We look forward to the next 2 days together. Let's go to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Great God and Father, again, we are so touched, so stunned that you want a relationship with us. We are so selfish and so foolish. We are rebellious and ignore you. We are prideful and harsh. You want a relationship with us. So much so, Father, that you say you want to be with us forever and ever and ever. It's more stunning than we can imagine. And Father, we pray that we can learn what it means to be family by looking at who you are as family for us. You give us your church, the body of Christ, to be brothers and sisters with you as our Father. Help us to learn what it means to be mothers and fathers from that, brothers and sisters from that, parents from those relationships you show us. Help us to know what your love does and means. It's more amazing than we can know, and that you call us in all of your power and all of your holiness and all of your sovereignty and all of your majesty. The thing you call us to do is to love in the obedience of your word and the walk we have. Thank you, Father, for that magnificent call, that we can apply that more and more and more to our lives. Unselfish, serving love. Thank you for all that are here tonight. Thank you for the children that are in the rooms next door that who've been taken care of. Thank you for the fact that we are families. We are all in families some way or another. Help us to be the families you want us to be and to learn from you. Give us a good evening, a good night's rest, so we can gather again and learn more tomorrow. All to your glory, Father. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much. There's some more